Welcome to the Wing Life Podcast, where we talk about wing foiling and the lifestyles of those who enjoy this great sport.
Hi, welcome back, guys. Stoked to have you joining us again for another episode. Today we are going to talk something very important: safety. How to go out there and be safe. Let's get into it. Thanks, guys, for joining.
If anybody knows me, I should probably leave because I'm probably not the safest person.
Here, I got a good entry point to this. I was giving my mom a lesson on a lake out on Vancouver Island. I had one leash to my board, right? And I'm like, you know what, Mom, don't worry about it. You can have my leash. We're at about 13 knots. There's no chance of anything happening. So I go, I'm tacking, I get up, whatever. I happen to fall. And what happens? The classic. My wing flips. I get caught on the trailing edge. So away from my wing, I'm all buckled in there. I can't move. It pushes my board away. By the time I get to catch my board, it's another foot, and it's like a slow motion action movie. And sure enough, it made its way down to the lake. Thank God we didn't have an outflow. It's stuck in a sandbar, but that there is safety. So you never know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. So what have you guys seen as the most basic fundamentals that we should all abide by?
Oof, this is a big one. So here's what I'd say. I'd say first off, when you get into this awesome sport, I would say, we've highlighted this many times, but, speak to your locals, speak to your local shops, get knowledgeable. But when you're ready to rock and roll, it's not going to hurt to, even though you may not look cool, you may lose some friends, whatever it may be, to have, whether it's tights or a wetsuit or booties, because you are in time climbing up on the board a lot and kind of, rubbing your knees and knee pads and that kind of stuff. Like, don't be afraid to just, like, it's okay if you use it. I wish I did in the beginning. I'm sure Gwen, when I gave him his setup, when I didn't even know who Gwen was, I just gave him my stuff and he was all bloody and people were sending me videos of him all bloodied up. And he was learning, but I would say, look, it's not going to hurt anything to throw on some gear, impact vest. Highly recommend a helmet in the beginning. It's not going to hurt anything. All that is good safety precautions that honestly, I think everybody should. I mean, we always fall back on, and I'm just going to say this because there's a lot of sports out there that you do. And when something bad happens, they're like, I didn't know I could do this. And it's like, well, you can literally stand up and fall and hit your head. And hopefully that doesn't ever happen to anybody. But I'm just saying, wing foiling can have any potential side effect of anything else that you could have bad happen. So take whatever precaution you feel comfortable with, whether it's a helmet, whether it's a mouth guard, whatever feel comfortable with. I would just say that I think the biggest things I see are people chafing up their knees and their feet. And I'd say the number one tip that I would just highlight in the very beginning here, including tapping into the safety, is take breaks. Like, literally, when you're learning, take breaks. Take a break, take some water, because you're so amped to learn it that you don't take a break. I'm not going to take a break. I'm going to get this. And usually leads to more.
I think there is also, like, you are so into it. You are like, in the fight, and you feel like you are getting closer. But as you get tired, you're going to make more mistakes. And so sometimes we feel like, I'm so close. I'm going to go again. But there is another day. And so just, you are in it for the long run. But yeah, for sure. I mean, helmet, impact vest. I feel like the most dangerous part, when you take a fall, is because the foil is lifting, and when you are not used to it at the beginning, is you kind of like fall sideways. You hit the rail or you hit the foil. That's the most dangerous. So impact vest, often you're gonna fall on your ribs if you fall on the rail. Impact vest, 100%. Helmet, and then when I started, I had my knees all bloody. I had the top of my feet all bloody, because you spend so much time on your knees, and that deck pad is grippy, so you don't slide, but it's also like taking your skin off, sometime if you spend too much time on it, moving around. So that's definitely important point. I've seen some people that like to have gloves just because of like the wing handling and their fingers rubbing. And as you get more experience, you're gonna be more efficient with it. But again, at first, you are just gripping everything so hard and fighting it. So that's when you need the most protective equipment. And then slowly, as you get more comfortable and you get used to it, you're gonna be able to maybe remove the knee pads because you are not spending as much time on your knees. Remove the glove.
And it's a valid point about booties as well, because if you're brand new coming into wind sports and water sports, every single beach is different. Some will have clams, some will have razors, some will have big boulders, some you have like algae built on. And if you're getting in and out based on whether or not you're going to have any shore break or any current, a pair of booties is always a really, really good place to start, because then at least you can get in and out of the water a little bit faster. Without that, if you're going to crawl on something and you got to figure all these techniques, if you happen to be in areas with reefs, like you don't want to get an urchin like I got 2 weeks ago. That was definitely something that you got to be careful about, and you don't really think about it until you get put into that position.
Well, with the booties, I've spent some time like riding, like winter riding, when you need 8 millimeters booties if you want your feet to be like still warm. And it's so hard to ride with thick booties when you cannot feel the burn. So also, knowing for beginners, if it's not that cold, you don't have to go extreme and wear booties that have a sole that's too thick. Otherwise, you have hard time feeling your burn and feeling where your feet are on the burn. So yes, you want to protect your feet, but don't like numb them.
Yes, very good point. You can get some really good summer booties or even winter surf booties that I've seen that have very, very thin bottoms. Yes, they might wear it a little bit faster, but you're getting some of that protection. So that's something that I've seen.
Yeah, I would say another super key point that we always forget about, that everybody forgets about, is when you go and you've been trying a few times, make sure that you take all your leashes that you have and know how they work. Know how I would take my leash off my board or my wing, or if something goes wrong, like what do I do? Think about it and think about these, because you never use them until you need to use them. And when you need to use them, you need to know how to react. And if you've never done it, you don't know how to react. And so it's really good to just take one time. And you should do this throughout your career of playing with wings and foiling or anything you do, is just make sure you try and understand how they work. How a leash, how do I detach myself from my wing to maybe my wrist leash or to maybe my waist leash. And the only reason I say it is there's scenarios, for instance, let's just say I crash and I happen to drag myself around a buoy, and now my leash is tied to the buoy, the wing's trying to fly away, and it starts pulling me underwater maybe, and I'm now drowning and I need to get done. Now, this is super extreme and I'm just painting a picture, but in theory, things do happen. And when they happen quick and you don't know, and it happens to the most experienced, you just want to make sure you know, or you have a solution. So if you kind of go through a few scenarios to just know what I would do, it's really good to do in the beginning and have an understanding of it, because some of the most experienced people in most sports usually have a setback, and that setback is because when it happens quick and you have to make a quick decision. And if you never activated your safeties, or you never know, you may delay, and that delay may be a challenge.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I was in Guadeloupe and we were like shooting some winging. It was kind of like offshore wind, really nice looking waves, and the waves were like out there outside the reef, and there was like a small pass to like access the outside. And anyway, coming back, the wind was in the way that like it was kind of like difficult to get back through the pass, and I hit the reef, and so fell. The reef was really shallow, and my leash, bird leash, got stuck on the reef. So I was like stuck on the reef, and the waves were like breaking. So I had to remove my board leash and to get away, because I was like just like stuck. I couldn't do anything. So knowing how to like operate in a way that when it's going to happen, you are not going to be in the most like ideal conditions. You might be like kind of like underwater being pulled, so you have that like element of like urgency, and you need to act quick. You don't have to like time to like figure out how this thing works. And for sure, I see a lot of people in lessons, when we are done, okay, just take your board leash off, I'm gonna carry your board, and it takes them like a minute to figure out how to remove the board leash. And so getting familiar with like how where your leash is, and how you can remove it quickly. Hopefully you don't have to, but
Have you guys seen any kind of top favorites for how boards and wings get attached to them? Is there something you guys have seen?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like a tricky like thing, and I don't know if there is like a best way. I feel like that's like a lot of like personal preference. Do you want like a wrist leash, a waist leash? Do you want your wing? Like for teaching, I find that I like to keep people have like a wrist leash and an ankle leash. Wrist leash for the wing, ankle leash for the bone. That keeps the leash away from each other, kind of like they don't get wrapped up as much. I found that like if I put them on like a waist leash for the wing, there's more chance that it's gonna cross at some point. But again, I feel like there's not like a clear rule of like one setup is better than the other. I think if you talk to your local guys, I'm sure everybody has a different setup, and they're going to be like, this is the best setup. So it's like, try it, see what works for you. But I like to keep it simple, and I say like, for a beginner, start with wrist leash for your wing and ankle leash for your board. For the board, I like to have a coil leash, so it's not too long and it doesn't go as much getting caught on your foil. So yeah, coil leash for the board is helpful.
Valid points. And especially with your board, if it is a coil, what I found is I think last week I was doing a big downwinder, and I always put my hands up in front of me whenever I fall. But we can go into fall techniques, because there's a whole series of techniques of how to fall properly on this like little skating rink and stuff. It's insane, because I've seen some people when they fall, they kick their board or they put all their pressure on their heels. But anyways, in this particular safety series and safety question, I was like, I don't need to put my hands up this time. I'm perfectly okay. The board's way far from me. First time I've ever got hit in the top lip by the nose of the board. Got my bucket on, got my vest on, but then it's like crack, bam. And I was like, oh, wow, if that had hit me somewhere else, I'm out by myself-ish. I have people around me, but still, like, it's very difficult to see somebody's position in the water. So I was like, okay, so like one technique for safety as well, that's stemming a little bit off of the equipment, but just make sure to protect your face and your head, because you don't know where the board is or the leash is or any obstacles are.
There's plenty of people out there winging with hockey masks on and guards. No, I'm just kidding. I personally think that, look, it's kind of situational awareness. And I think when you're learning something, you're going to have falls. You're going to have these, the goal is to mitigate it or put it at the least amount possible to have these scenarios. And I would say, what I would say that usually leads to a lot of these is, and I would just say, let's help mitigate it. So when you're out there, if you're feeling like you're getting overpowered, or you're feeling like the wind's picking up, or you're feeling like you're uncomfortable, all these are signs that you should go in, start again tomorrow. Because what happens, I do see a lot with safety in this sport, is people just keep, I'm gonna learn it. I'm gonna keep going today. Like, the waves are building. I don't like waves, but I'm out here. This is my day. Like, and they keep pushing. And I would say, those are taking your safety precautions, and they're going lower and lower and lower. So your potential of injuries or potential of setbacks could go much higher, faster. So be aware of, usually your common sense tells you pretty quick, like, hey, I'm not comfortable. Ooh, it's windy. Whoa, it's this black cloud. Whoa, it's snowing. I don't know. Those are signs that like you should listen to.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that fear of missing out. You see everybody's out, like the good guys are having a great time, and you are like, I don't want to miss out on that. I want to be too. But you always have to for sure like check like, do you feel comfortable? And if you don't, that's definitely a good sign that like, okay, let's really think about this. And that makes me think also just like kind of like, understanding the weather. Maybe you need to have like a weather app or something, so you know what you are getting into, because conditions can change, quickly. Hopefully, if you are a beginner, you are not like way out there. But just knowing like, if you are on a day where the wind is supposed to switch like 180, that you are not like out there when all of a sudden it's like offshore and now you are like struggling to come back. So before you go on your session, safety equipment is also, making sure you are like checking the forecast and what is going to happen out there.
Community-based wind checking, I think, is always a super good idea, because there'll be some people that have taken that learning to another level where they can figure out high pressure and low pressure systems and why is there wind today? What's going to happen? Like I've seen one situation in like a town of Toronto where we were out riding in another area and a lot of people knew there was this big squall system coming through, but some people didn't know, so they got caught in it. So one of the first things I think safety wise as well is, what does the water look like? Like, what does 10 knots look like? What does 20 knots look like? What's a squall? What's this gray line coming towards me? And it just keeps cranking. Like this stuff, like none of us knew, at least from coming from a non-wind sport. But I think that's something that you can really fall in love with. You can sit on the shore and you can get a little application for your phone with a little wind turbine and just put it up and see if you can guess how strong the wind is. Does this feel like 10 knots? Does it feel like 20? And with it shifting, you can start to put it in relation to a compass. Like, is it coming from the north? Is it coming from the south? Like, why is it changing? I think these sports, because we're out there kind of like with friends, but you still have to take a great element of safety onto your shoulders. So if something happens, like, yes, there's the Coast Guard. Yes, those are your friends to tow you to shore. This is worst case scenarios. But I think taking on that responsibility to learn a bit more, I think is a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I think that's what makes these sports so special too, is you're not just going to the gym and like 20 pounds is 20 pounds, the same place as 20 pounds over there. It's the same weight. You don't really have weather conditions. It's not raining in the gym. So it's, so the same. And I would say with these type of sports, there's elements that are a little bit of more risky or unknown. But I would say a general rule of thumb, there's a million apps out there. I would say I use, and I'm not plugging this, I'm just saying I use iKitesurf. But I would recommend a few things for people. That is, talk to your locals, watch what the locals are doing. If they're all getting off the water, there's a reason. And then the other one is visual videos. So like live videos of this beach or live videos off this hotel. You can visually see what the ocean is doing, what the conditions are. So you visually see what's happening. And then an app to know the wind or weather, and just take a look to see if on the radar, what's coming on the radar, to know the radar, everything's moving in this direction, it's coming at us. So that's going to be here and so forth time. And knowing your conditions is super important. So safety, 101, I would say, Gwen said it, I think, and that's in the very beginning, is before you go on your day, know, is there a front coming? Is there something that's going to change? Or is it going to be all day, this perfect wind? But know that that's part of that whole adventure into learning that day. But super important to make sure. And I'd totally shout out to all you guys and say, Gwen, what's your top things you use for weather? And Luke, same thing, because I think all this helps people. I use iKitesurf. I think it's great. And then I just use like marine forecasts like NOAA to just see what's going on with the ocean. And then I always look at live cams. That's what I do.
Yeah, I think it depends on like your area. Like I also use iKitesurf because it works really well for us. But depending on which country you are in, like all of that is gonna change. But also have a plan. Like don't just go out and figure out how to like come up with a plan while you are out there, knowing your spot, and it can happen that sometime the wind dies, and okay, what's my plan? Can I exit somewhere else? That would be save me a 2-hour swim back. It's gonna make you more confident if you know you have options out there when something happens, that if you just haven't even think about that something could go wrong, and then you are out there and then you didn't think about the plans, and you are thinking that my only option is to go back there and I can't. So now I'm like freaking out. So if you are in this situation, I can't get back to the spot where I started. Okay, no worries. I had this plan. If I can't make it back, I could go here. Yeah, I'm gonna drop my gear here and walk back, or I'm gonna, give a call or whatever. But have a plan before you go out of what could happen, and it's gonna be okay. Often we get maybe scared that like if we can't get back to where we started, it's kind of like emergency. No, there is other options that you can consider.
I was just going to say that we should shout out to Zane Schweitzer, because he assessment shows up at a spot, assess the location, assess that day, assess everything, safety, where am I going to be, my safety to get out here, the wind, the conditions, you look at your situational awareness and know it. And I think Zane mentioned that a lot.
I think that's a lot of things that we start to take for granted, but every time we go to a new spot, there's like a series of questions you just ask everybody. At the start, my brother and I would go, and we were going to this new location. It's like, whoa, there's nobody here. This is going to be sick. And then you're like, why isn't there anybody here? Is there an undertow? Is there a rapids? Is there a dam? And you're like, nah. Are there boats? But I think it's a very valid point from the both of you. Ask questions to the local people. Maybe there's a big rock in the center with a lot of these areas, and your foil's going to hit it, and then you don't know how you're going to fall. Or maybe there's a bit of a reef there and you can get caught on it. Practice on land. Put your safeties on. Take your safeties off. Figure out what's the best. Make sure that when you fall, you are going to protect something, because you do have a bit of a foil there that could be sharp. All very, very valid points. And I think it's the immersion that makes the most sense out of this. Like, just immerse yourself into learning as much as you can. It's like learning a new language. Yes.
Yeah, this is a hard language. This sounds like gibberish.
Things are gonna happen, but if you take precautions, like you're gonna limit the risk. The risk is always there. You might wear like everything, your helmet, your impact vest, your booties. You have like extra everything, and then the foil is gonna hit you exactly at the spot that is not covered. That's part of it, but at least you took the precaution to like limit the risk. And if you do that, most likely, you're gonna be fine.
So, yeah.
So if you're struggling like we were, just turn to this.
That's it. Use AI to generate a photo of you winging. You don't have to wing.
We actually all of us have never done it. That's just really good AI.
All right. So we've gone over the kind of basics of maybe wind strength to start off. What are the best conditions that you guys have seen to go out in? By conditions, I mean wind direction. Onshore, side shore, side off, offshore. What, if I'm learning, what does all that stuff mean? And what does it relate to me and my safety?
I would say in general, actually all conditions can work depending on everybody's location, right? Now that's a loaded explanation, because, maybe I can ride straight offshore because I have 300 yards of perfectly knee deep or, just foil deep enough water, and I can walk back. But I would say, in general, I would say the safest thing you can do is do side winds or sideways to your beach so that you can go and come in at any given time at one side or direction, versus onshore can be a lot harder because it's pushing you onto shore. Offshore is beautiful, usually calmer, looks less windy, usually less wavy. But again, can you come back? But I would say in general, I'd say side shore is usually the safest in general.
Yeah, and probably 15 knots, I think, is probably the most ideal conditions. Past 20, it gets maybe harder, and then under 10, it's you just don't have quite enough wind. So 15, I feel like, would be your sweet spot if you can find that.
But I would say, and Gwen would say this, and both of you guys would say this, if it's blowing 10 and you can stand on that board and you can get on the water and mow the lawn and learn, it's going to help you. Promise. Just more time you can put that wing in your hands, the more time you can try this sport, the more times you can do the walk of shame. You're learning something.
Yeah, taxiing, actually a really, really good point. And learning how to bob on that board can, let's say the wind does shut off, talking about different kind of fronts or something coming out. And then if you haven't spent a lot of time, let's say on your knees or even trying to stand up in marginal conditions, then it goes from a very safe situation to a more hazardous situation pretty quickly. And there's nothing wrong with going out in 8 knots or 10 knots and trying to practice standing up, just the basics. And then you at least understand what happens if my wing blows up. How do I swim back? Like, can I paddle that long? What happens if the wind dies? How do I wrap this wing into my feet, for example, to swim back? What happens if I lose my board? All of those points, I think, are valid. Have there been any tips that you guys have seen that have been the best? Do you practice full deflates just in a situation like that in a lesson? Has it been something that people should do at home?
I would say don't rush into deflating your wing, because it would be a bummer if you deflate your wing and then 5 minutes later the wing picks up again, but now you can't blow it up. So I would say the deflating your wing, might be your last resort, but just learning how to swim with your wing inflated. You lay on your board like a surfboard, your wing is behind you, and you put your feet on the leading edge to hold your wing. And we have a video on how to body drag back to your board using your wing. It's a very simple technique where your leading edge is on the water, pointed toward kind of downwind, and you just hold the back handle, and that's going to help you, that's going to drag you downwind. So with your other hand, you can just help and swim. You can watch that video to learn how to do this. It's very, very simple technique. Maybe practice it, before you need it. That way, that, you can do it. But again, for sure, try not to put yourself in a position where you went so far out, something happened, and now, all of the options become more complicated. So just play it safe. You don't need to go super far out to learn or to have fun. You can get right there, close enough to shore that you can swim. And just a general rule is don't go further than where you don't feel comfortable swimming.
And I would capitalize real quick on that and say there's a valid point that needs to be said that people forget about, and that is when you're first learning, you're going through this whole operation of picking my safety zone and assessing everything, and maybe I'm right foot dominant or left foot dominant, but I may be one way really dominant. Usually people are. So I may go out to my left and I'm pretty good to my left, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just turn around and do the same thing the other direction. Know that maybe that is not going to be as easy as that direction that you just went. So in the beginning, make sure to stay close where it's distance of swimming or walking to comfortable, because that other direction may be way more challenging.
That's huge, because that's pretty natural, actually. Like anybody who's done snowboarding or any kind of, they're either, left or, I would say so.
It's like
Yeah,
99%.
definitely. Or even on the beach, right? Like even on the beach, like there's one, you're holding the wing with your left hand forward or right hand forward. There's one dominant kind of zone. Yeah, that's huge, actually.
And we forget about that. And we see it a lot because people are getting it on their good way. I'm getting it. I'm almost there. I'm almost foiling. And then they're like 50 miles out. And then they turn around. They can't even hold the wing.
Yes. And I think like we're highlighting these points right now. And I think those of you listening or watching might think that some of this stuff is extremely basic. But I'm telling you, when you get out there and you're brand new and you're so focused on it, all we're trying to do is kind of slowly bring all of these points into your consciousness. So these are things that might not be apparent at the start because when you're out there, your mind goes blank. If you get a little scared because you fell and you don't know if there's big fish in the area, everything else goes blank. So by talking about this stuff and slowly adding your little like pre-safety checklist, almost like an airplane does before they take off, I'm sure those pilots don't like going over absolutely everything. But at the start, I think it'll become a lot easier later on. But I think these are pretty much, are there any other safety points that you guys have seen or you would recommend for somebody brand new?
I was just going to say you could download the Wing Life podcast. There's 199 safety checks that you have to do before you go wing foiling. It's a link in the description. Only 199. Takes about 15 hours before you start, and then you're good to go.
Well, the other thing is, and that applies to many things, outdoor, everything, but just, try not to go out on your own. If you can have a friend, make sure somebody knows you are here, somebody is with you maybe. That's definitely, ideal.
Yes, let somebody know where you're going. Let them maybe know the anticipated time. Watches are always a good idea, right? Like Apple Watch or other watch where you can have some communication or at least have GPS or something on there. It's always a good idea. And then make sure you're checking tides, especially because tides could have a big impact. Like if it's switching from a high tide and the tide is kind of sweeping out, or if you have a lot of current, I think everybody in your local community will be able to tell you where there's the safest spot to learn and where this is medium, advanced, intermediate. And don't be afraid to put in the time, I think is what we're all trying to say here. And try to enjoy that time because you might reach 10, 15 years into your journey where you've kind of hit a bit of a ceiling plateau, and surpassing that will require X amount of skills that could take a long time. And maybe you don't have that time to do it safely. So I think enjoying the process is huge.
Yeah, I would say, Luc, you tapped on a big one, but you don't know when, and I've said this in this podcast, but things do happen out there all the time when you start learning stuff. And I'd say to the Apple Watch, we have our dear friend, the legend, Harry. He actually had a situation where he needed to use his watch, and that's what saved him. And it can be a normal day. It can be anything. And I it's always good, even, somebody listening to this, it's like, this isn't for a beginner. This is for everyone, because there are all these reality checks that we even sometimes maybe don't think about. And they're reality checks to remember for every session, to be better, to be safer, to, help somebody else. But it's important to remember that, because I truly think that, a perfect scenario was he had a situation and he needed it, and that's what helped him be here today. So,
all right, guys, good points, and thanks everybody for joining us on episode number 3. Guys, what do you want to talk about on episode number 4?
We want to see everybody. So we are getting clips sent in, and we're going to start breaking down as we start. We started this general conception of the start of wing foiling, and we're going to get more into diving into people's, hopefully your challenging mistake that you're making or problem that you're trying to overcome, because we want to dive into it. We want to dissect it. Hopefully give you the tips and tricks to help you in that little hurdle, and then on to the next one.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us in episode 3, and we're looking forward to the next one.